Hey everybody, this is Cameron from Noxious Anonymous. Today I am joined by a newbie. Welcome Eric to the show, and we're here to talk
Thank you very
about
much.
our Twin Peaks thoughts of the day. Now Eric, when did you first see Twin Peaks?
I saw Twin Peaks in college, so unfortunately, I'm dating myself a little bit on that. I don't mean to make anybody feel old, but I learned about Twin Peaks in a class about the modern TV drama. And the professor, a man named Robert Thompson, I don't know if anybody knows him, if anyone watching this is a film buff or into entertainment news. He's a big guy in that world. Um, it was essentially his contention that Twin Peaks is the show that is responsible for Lost, 24, Game of Thrones, all of the fantastic TV that we have now.
X
He
Files?
pretty much attributes to Twin Peaks.
Right.
Yep. And so he we watched the pilot. I think we watched the the reveal of Laura's killer, and then we watched the last episode. So I actually missed big chunks of the show in his class, but I was hooked. Like I had to seek out the at the time it was just DVDs and like YouTube clips, or actually YouTube may not have even existed then, but I found it. I had to watch it. I had to get all of it.
So did you go out and get? Well, it wasn't out on. Was it out on DVD at the time, or did you have to go get that big VHS box set?
So the VHS box set was probably like $300, and I wasn't paying for that.
Right.
In the first season, you could only get episodes. You couldn't get the pilot,
Right.
because if you remember any Twin Peaks fans worth their salt know that the pilot had some different distribution rights, and so like only episodes like 2 through what is it 8, 2 through 7.
Yeah.
Like
One
that's
through.
all I could find. But I'd
Right.
already seen the pilot, so that didn't matter as much to me.
Right. Now, what happened was because Lynch, put an alternate ending on there for the European release for the
Right.
theatrical. That's why Warner Brothers had the rights to that. And so one of the big
Got it.
things about I guess the gold box as well as the Blu-ray set was, the pilot's gonna be with it. And actually no,
Yeah.
the gold box was the pilot was with it, and then the Blu-ray set was the movie is with the series. So
And the missing pieces, footage people hadn't actually seen ever.
ever,
Right.
yeah, and so you saw the series, and how many times would you say you have watched the show?
I think I've watched it through 3 times, which, again, maybe next to some Twin Peaks fans who've been with it since the beginning, I'm very, very new. But I love it. And I almost feel like I get to approach the series from a different perspective than maybe some folks who were there at the beginning, watching it when it was actually on TV, because I got to experience it in that sort of Netflix way. I got to binge it on DVD, and then my subsequent times watching it have been on Netflix. And to me, it's almost a different show because you and I have talked a few times, and you've made reference to kind of the doldrums of season 2, and maybe I'm marking myself as a target for some out there, but I don't pick on those season 2 episodes after Laura's killer is revealed as much as some people do, because for my money, it's kind of Laura's murder was kind of, as Lynch always said, that like open door into the town. And so solving her crime to me didn't matter, because the whole point was we just need an opening into Twin Peaks and to meet these weird kind of quirky people. And we had that. We did that. And so now we're already with them. And I don't know. I think Ben Horn playing Civil War is just about one of the funniest things they ever did. Little Nicky, that's another story.
Now, Mark Frost has said in retrospect that he wishes he could have brought Wyndham Earl in earlier to kind
Yeah.
of make it a little tighter. I get that. I understand that. And maybe he's right. Although I do think that it is nice to have a little bit of downtime with the characters before the next big thing happens. I
Right.
don't. Maybe we don't need five episodes of downtime, but I think it does. See, here's the thing. I mentioned the doldrums, but I'm a Twin Peaks apologist. So,
Yeah.
like, even the worst episode of Twin Peaks is still, to me, like, great television. Because
Absolutely.
it's another opportunity to spend time with those characters. Yeah, Mark Frost says he wish he could have brought Wyndham Earl in tighter. I wish he had made a change of, instead of Josie shooting Cooper, it should have been Wyndham Earl who shot Cooper.
Right. That actually would have been a pretty good twist to have him there the whole time.
Right, because at the next episode, the very next episode, Cooper's sitting at breakfast with Albert, and Albert says, "Your partner's flown the coop," and then we find out Wyndham Earl's left. I mean, are introduced to the idea of his partner having escaped the mental institution. So I thought, oh, well, that makes sense, right? He's the one that shot Cooper. And then it was Josie going, I had to shoot you, and it was just that always rubbed me the wrong way, because it seemed like trying to get an actress off the show rather than a legitimate end to that mystery.
Right, because it always seems to come out of nowhere. To be honest, even after I've watched the show, after on my third time or fourth time watching through the show, I kind of almost forget by the time we get to that episode, oh yeah, Cooper was shot. Oh yeah, that's right, Josie. It's kind of you're absolutely right in that it feels like it's kind of just thrown in. On the other hand, I very much like the idea of the. I'm sorry about that. I very much like the idea of kind of this really dark story with Josie, where she's becoming kind of like Catherine's, woman slave, and she's got this guy who, the show never exactly comes out and says it, but I mean, she's basically this guy's sex slave.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of a testament to how in 1991 Twin Peaks was doing some really dark, seedy television on ABC, no less. I don't know. Again, I think I'm probably in your camp. I'm probably an apologist for the show in some sense, because, even the little Nicky storyline, I still think that Ian Buchanan's character, and I apologize, his name escapes me. Again, marking myself for a target.
Dick Tremaine.
There it is, Dick Tremaine. And then, his first name is always used with such vigor whenever everybody's mad at him. He's an interesting character. It's just more of the same in that town. Even the mayor is a character. Lana. I think people hate Lana too. I like Lana.
No, she's my worst character. I'll take her over. I'll take Evelyn over her any day.
Oh wow. Oh, we differ.
But I'm just saying that the the little Nicky storyline is ridiculous, right? But I think that Andy and Dick in the show, they're very well acted, very funny little scenes. They may not have the power that the Laura Palmer story had, but they're not badly done. It's just you may be questioning why the hell is this subplot in the show, but it's kind of funny watching them bumbling around offices and little trench coats and stuff like that. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Josie. I always thought in Fire Walk With Me, the movie, that because Laura is said in the series to be tutoring Josie, right, in English, I thought it would have been very important to have a scene with her tutoring Josie, and then looking at her, Laura, towards the end of her life, and looking at Josie and saying, kind of letting her know that Laura sees the true her, that she's hiding something too. And I think that would have been very cool to know that Laura was aware that Josie wasn't maybe aware of what her past was, but was aware that she had this aura of she's hiding something too.
Yeah. To me, there's a side to Twin Peaks. I think Twin Peaks just has so many facets, and the beauty of the show having happened and kind of being gone means we sort of analyze it over and over again. And I feel like Laura and I think that you see something in the Laura character that is something that I've noticed as well, which is that, Dale Cooper is this sort of perceptive, special person. We know that in the show. I mean, the fact that he's kind of embroiled in these sort of otherworldly elements and they're sort of drawn to him. Laura was that kind of person too, which is, I think, why Bob was drawn to her as well. And it's just kind of an interesting juxtaposition that Laura is this character who was only 17, 18, and she just didn't have that power of self that Cooper does. Cooper is a fully realized adult man, out there, FBI agent. He gets it. He's studying Tibet. Laura was a victim of Bob because she just, what outlet did she have? I mean, he had her all to himself. I mean, in more ways than one. And so that's just one of those elements of the show that, Laura was as perceptive as Cooper, and Cooper saw those kinds of things in people as well.
And I think there's also that moment when, after the sheriff punches Albert in the morgue, and Albert kind of falls on Laura's body, right? And then Cooper has them all leave. There's a moment where, Cooper takes Laura's hand and puts it back, and he kind of looks at her, and it almost seems like, I mean, also in Cooper's dream, right? There is a connection between Cooper and Laura. Almost to the point where the last scene in Fire Walk With Me is them together trapped in the Black Lodge.
Right.
arm in arm, basically. So here's a theory that I've been floating around for a while, and forgive me if I'm repeating myself because some of you guys have heard this, but I'm curious what Eric thinks about this.
Okay.
And that is, okay, so we know, okay, there was the Agent Cooper diary thing that we briefly talked about before, and so he was the one with Sam Stanley investigating Teresa Banks' murder according to the book. Obviously, that didn't happen because Kyle didn't want to be a part of the movie fully, so they brought in Chet Desmond. Chet Desmond, Agent Cooper, flip the names. Okay, so here's the thing that's interesting, though, is if we go by the movie, and the movie is considered canon by Lynch, by Frost, I think,
right.
Frost, I think, reluctantly, but maybe after he saw the missing pieces, he's like, okay, it's canon. But, okay, so you have the people in the Black Lodge, the beings or spirits, whatever you want to call them, and you have Bob, and they overtake Leland as a young boy, right?
Right.
And Leland becomes the attorney to Benjamin Horne.
Right.
So he has access to a lot of powerful people.
Right.
Laura, obviously she was a young girl, but she had affiliations with a lot of people in the town. And Bob wanted to get inside her, like you said, in more ways than one. But the FBI agents came to investigate Teresa Banks. And
right.
Chet Desmond grabbed the ring and he disappeared. But Laura dying, her not letting them in, brings Cooper to town.
Right.
While Cooper's in town, he has this dream. Major Briggs comes to him and says that there's messages from the woods, or from outer space, but it really became the woods, where it said Cooper, Cooper, Cooper. Right?
Right.
So, do you think that the whole point of Laura ultimately dying was to bring Cooper to town so that Bob could get inside Cooper ultimately, so that Cooper could go back to Washington, D.C. and be around the most powerful people in the country? Do you think the Black Lodge is secretly trying to become powerful in the real world as well as the mystical world?
You know, that is a theory I've never heard before, and it is fascinating just in how, like, the connections are all there. You know, I'm not sure. I mean, I think as someone who kind of looks at the show and looks at, like, the character of Bob as it exists in that, you know, it just in that the world that we see him in, mm-hmm. He seems to be obsessed only with sadness and despair and pain. But, you know, the other elements of the Black Lodge, especially, you know, kind of the things that we see in Fire Walk With Me, you know, seem like they've got other things going on. Like, there's other, like, machinations that they have, you know, definitely not clear what they are. But, I couldn't even begin to get. I like that theory. I think that's interesting.
And this is a theory that I never had for 20-something years.
Right.
I always just watched the show at face value, and you know, I got all the connections and stuff like that, but I just assumed that Cooper entered the Black Lodge with imperfect courage, like Hawk said, and just shit happens, and he got, you know, the good side got trapped, and he got the bad side with Bob got out. That's what I just always just took.
Right.
But what's interesting is, you know, once you start meeting other Twin Peaks people and you get involved with the pages and stuff like that, and you kind of revisit the show, you just start to, you know, think things in different ways and this and that. And then I started thinking, was this all done on purpose? Because there seems to be a lot of allusions to getting Cooper to town.
Right.
So, you know, I don't think it was an intention on Lynch and Frost's part. And I don't think that that's necessarily how you have to look at the series, obviously. But I think that it is an interesting theory to kind of go through the series and see if it matches up.
Right.
And for my money, it almost seems to, but in a way it kind of scares me as well, because I'm thinking, God, you know, I never even thought about that. But if it is that, then that's even that has even more implications than just Cooper stumbling out of the Black Lodge as Bob. I mean, that changes everything,
Right.
in terms of, what their purpose is. So
There's an interview with Bob Engels, who co-wrote Firewalk with Me with Lynch, and maybe you've seen it. I apologize, I can't think of the website where I read it, but maybe I can find it and post the page later once I dig it up. But Bob Engels talks about some other stories that I think maybe made it into the script at some point and then were pulled out, or maybe just things he was spitballing with Lynch about. But one of those things was like that the original plan was for that movie to begin during like the Eisenhower administration,
right.
and that you were going to see that like the Black Lodge inhabitants were, and it's very strange the way he describes it, that they were like insects in the White House or something, and that ultimately awareness of them like creates them and they become more like corporeal. It was very weird, very trippy, and I have to dig that out so that I can kind of match it up against what I'm explaining. But
Bob Engels also likes to say that the inhabitants of the Black Lodge come from a planet of cream corn.
Yes, he does.
So
I've read that too.
So I don't know how much he's joking with people, or as they used to say back in the day, joshing with people. Then and how much is truth. Yeah, that would have been interesting. I think that would have made people scratch their heads even more than Firewalk with Me.
Oh yeah.
But have you seen The Missing Pieces?
I have.
Okay.
I thought they were great.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few I really liked, and there was a bunch where I was like, I'm kind of glad they didn't make it in the movie, but I've kind of come around on a few more. So,
Right.
But that scene above the convenience store, right, where we see the inhabitants of the Black Lodge, right?
Yeah.
It's a extended version in the Missing Pieces than what we see in the movie.
Right.
That scene should have been in the movie.
Yes.
That full scene.
There are some people to me that who defend Firewalk with Me to a fault, including that scene above the convenience store, the very trippy sort of like in and out scene with David Bowie. And I understand that David Lynch is, he's very artistic, he kind of feels the way the movie's going, and that's how you make beautiful cinema. However, you still need to tell a story in cinema. And that scene in the movie as it is very hard to digest, almost incomprehensible. Maybe I'm just not that smart. Maybe some folks in the comments are going to tell me exactly how smart I am. But I just think that the complete version you see in The Missing Pieces, you are spot on. That's what should have been in the movie, because even that scene was very dense, but there was definitely a point to it. Like I got out of that scene what I think I was supposed to get in the movie that aired in the theaters.
Yeah, the thing is, the scene in the theaters, while I think it works, but it's so truncated that if you're not kind of with the movie, it's just kind of like, huh? But in the extended version, you kind of, without them saying anything explicit, you kind of get a little bit more insight into what these beings are. I mean, they don't really say anything on the nose, but this whole thing of like intercourse between two worlds, and from the chrome, the chrome and all this stuff it kind of makes like emotional sense. Like, oh, yes. Okay, I think I understand a little bit more. Whereas by them cutting out a lot of that stuff, it was just kind of like, here's the little man from another place for a line, and here's Bob, and it's like, huh, what? And then David Bowie disappears, and it's like, okay, what was the point of all that? All right. The thing about Firewalk with Me, and I've said this before, so forgive me, but is that there seems to be two camps, and maybe not anymore with the Missing Pieces and stuff, but before the film has been reappraised as a masterpiece, when it was known as one of Lynch's worst movies for 15, 20 years. A lot of people said they should have either gotten rid of the whole Dear Meadow, Teresa Banks stuff and recut in some of Laura's stuff and made that the whole movie.
Right.
Or some people say, no, they should have just gotten rid of Laura and made the whole thing about Teresa Banks. It's interesting. Some people have like two different ways of looking at it. And I kind of look at it as, it kind of reminds me of like 2001, where it's like the two stories you think meet, but they don't quite meet, you know. So there's like a little bit of mystery there, and Fire Walk with Me in a way is the beginning of the next period of Lynch's career, because if you look at Lost Highway, that's two stories combined into one. Mulholland Drive became two stories combined into one, you know, and it just kind of felt like, oh, okay, Lynch just likes telling one story and then hopping over to another story. You know, the difference was Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive circled back to bring it all together, and Fire Walk with Me never brings back Chris Isaac or Kiefer Sutherland in any way. So it's almost like if you missed the first 30 minutes, if someone walked in 30 minutes into this movie and began with Laura walking down the street, they really didn't, quote unquote, miss anything according to the plot of the story. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, the only thing they might have missed was the ring, but even in context with the Laura scenes, you know, you kind of get it. You know, I think there's enough there.
Right. And I think that's one of the, if I say flaws of the film, even though I love the film, is that going by this day-by-day thing of Laura and, you know, on her way to death, that's not really a story structure. It is, but it invites pacing problems, because there's no like true arc. It's just, and this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And a lot of it, it's interesting because Lynch and Engels said that they went back to the pilot and used that as a basis to match everything up. But there's a lot of things in the movie that don't match up with the pilot, you know?
Right.
So
it's, you know, and it's funny too, because I mean, I think if there's any arc you can give to the movie, and it's not even really an arc, it's more of like, you know, the downward trajectory of like a roller coaster, is Laura is like each day slipping like deeper into hell. Like that's kind of the one kind of direction you could say she's going down. Mm-hmm. But there's never, like, her story is exactly that. It's day by day, things are getting worse, and then they culminate in, you know, to be honest, like one of the most like terrifying, horrible, and then almost beautiful scenes you've ever seen in a movie. Because you kind of get a side of Laura's death that you never saw before. Laura was this tragic figure. She still is. But at the end of that movie, almost, you know, you've been pitying Laura all this time, and, you know, you should. But in a way, the way the end of that movie works, like, Laura's problems are over. Like, she's been claimed by the angel or the light or something good, and she escaped it. Like, Bob didn't get her. She got away. You know, maybe the new series is going to give us some additional information, a different spin on that. But I always thought that was a particular strength of the movie, in that, you know, what more can you really say about, like, the horrible death of someone? Well, this, actually. And it actually turns out to be quite nice, you know.
Yeah, if there was one disappointment, one major disappointment, and then there are a few with the movie, although, like I said, I'm a Twin Peaks apologist, so I forgive it. But there's one thing, Mr. Lynch, that you didn't do for me in this film, and that is you gave me an R-rated Laura Palmer film, but there was no scene of her at One-Eye Jacks.
Ha!
If any sequence should have been in this movie, instead of having Ronette saying, "I haven't seen you since you were thrown out of One-Eye Jacks," show don't tell, Mr. Lynch. I want to see Blackie throw Laura out of there.
Yep.
You know, that would have been an amazing sequence of, I mean, think about those prostitute stuff in, like, Wild at Heart. I mean, you know, think about what One-Eye Jacks would have looked like in this movie, and Laura doing something behind Blackie's bag, maybe stealing some of her cocaine or whatever like that, and Blackie throwing her out of there. I think that would have been a stunning sequence.
I almost wonder if, and you know, we've already seen, like, complete scripts for the past 20 years, and there is no scene at One-Eyed Jacks, but, you know, we all have heard of the Benjamin Horne scene that got cut out because the actor wouldn't do it. I'm sorry, his name escapes me, but he wouldn't do it because he thought that it was too... Because basically, what is it? He's, like, holding cocaine over her head, like, for a kiss or something. He's like, "I'll give it to you, but kiss me." And he thought, like, that was too dark. And I've always, to be honest, like, I've always kind of felt critical of the actor for that, because it's kind of like, were you watching the same TV show that I was? I mean, even though we never saw your character doing these things, like, we talked about it. We
No,
know he was having an affair with like a 17-year-old girl. Like
and he tried to have sex with another girl that he didn't know was his daughter.
exactly. Like so it almost seems like a moral stand with no stand. Like I don't know. Like I sort of feel like the end of the show left a bad taste in some of the actors' mouths, and he was one of them, and so he just kind of opted out. That's and again, I think it's sad because I actually think it would have been kind of cool to see some of the Ben Horn Laura relationship, since that was always the thing that it felt like that wasn't realized as much as some of the other facets of Laura's life, not just in that movie, but overall.
Yeah, and I think that if you watch, God, I don't know why you would do this, but if you watch the movie and then watch the show, right, you would sit there and be like, well, why are we dealing with all these characters in the show? They had no bearing on Laura whatsoever. But yes, they did in the show. It's just that for whatever reason, it's like, I don't know. I wish I was editing Fire Walk with Me at the time, because I would have been able to figure out how to put that Dr. Jacoby scene in. I mean, I think it's important.
Yes. Yes.
I think there are I mean, there's a lot of the missing pieces that I don't think need to be in the film, but there are certain moments, like, for instance, even the moment towards the ending of where Laura is walking out of her bedroom, and before she hops on the bike with James, and her dad comes home, and she's waiting in the bushes, and she sees him like kind of possessed by Bob walking up into the house.
Yeah.
I almost think that scene is so filled with tension that needed to be in the film, because that would explain why he's looking out the window all angry. It was not like he's just sitting there in the window like Norman Bates or something. And the other thing is, how, like, at the ending or the missing pieces has like Annie and Cooper still in the lodge, and then we get the going back to the hotel room with him hitting himself with the mirror. And I know Lynch is probably really going, how the hell, this doesn't fit into the film at all, because it's all Laura's thing, and how is this it wouldn't have fit into the film proper.
Right.
But if that film came out today, that's what you call a post-credit scene.
Yes.
I could totally see after the credits went, and someone should make a fan film like this, or a fan cut like this. After the end credits go, that's when it fades up and it says 3 months later, and then you see Annie going down the hallway.
I have to say, and I'm picking on a minor point here, that actually always bothered me about that particular piece of the missing pieces. I say always bothered me. It's bothered me for a year then. But when it says some months later, the course of Twin Peaks was really only a month, not even a complete month, because, well, no, it would have been just over a complete month.
Right.
And it just sort of it's a minor detail, but I guess it just bothers me that they didn't even have enough, like, they didn't even just check, well, so each episode of the show is a day about, and then we do like a 3-day jump, but then it's a day by day thing. Like, they couldn't have just figured that out.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's so many things going on in that movie that at first I thought, are these mistakes? And then I think, no, there's so many of them, they almost have to be done on purpose.
Right.
For instance, like, again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but the picture of Laura at school and at home are flipped.
Right.
Right? Like I said, Dale Cooper, Chet Desmond, they're flipped. There's Annie, when she's on the stretcher, is wearing Caroline's dress, not Annie's dress, right?
Right.
In the missing pieces, you have Laura with the truckers, and they're going to the pink room, and they start doing donuts, and they start spinning around the dirt. But while they're doing donuts, there's a sign there that says Cooper Tires. So you have Cooper and the donuts,
Right.
right? Just weird things like that. And I know there's a lot more, but there's a lot of like this duality and flipping, and you just have to wonder if, like, you can't have, like Deer Meadow, right? Deer Meadow is the complete antithesis to Twin Peaks. You have the cackling receptionist, you have the sheriff's department that doesn't want to cooperate, and I mean, that's why Cooper says in the pilot to Harry Truman, when the Bureau gets called in, the Bureau's in charge. Sometimes local law enforcement has a problem with that. I mean, that's stemming from all that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's it's a hell of a series. It's a hell of a movie, and can't wait to see what happens next. So when you heard, I'm sure you've been hearing for a while, Twin Peaks coming back, and of course, it all turned out to be false for a long time. But then it was confirmed that it was coming back. What was your initial reaction to that?
I'm pretty sure I lost 2 full working days of productivity at my office. I was about as happy. It's a TV show, and I get that. And maybe this is making me seem like a bigger geek than is palatable even online. But I was about as excited as you could be. I mean, I can't think of a more painful ending of a show. Our hero is not only like trapped away from the people he loves, but there's like an evil entity wearing his face out in the world. Like, what has been going on for 25 years? Like, I just, the potential for disappointment is there. But to be honest, I just feel so positive about it. I feel like if there's anybody who can give us something that we didn't even know we wanted, it's David Lynch and Mark Frost. And so I was just ecstatic. Like, I think there was, I've read so many articles, especially like immediately after it happened. They were so negative and they were so cynical about, you can't go home again, or how do you redo Twin Peaks? It's already been done. That Twin Peaks has already been redone by so many other shows. And it's just like, guys, a show that broke our hearts when it was canceled is coming back 25 years later. Let's be happy about it, please, for just a week.
I think people, were upset because people were let down by Star Wars. People were let down by the new Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
I think people are a little nervous about things coming back 20 years later.
Yeah.
But Laura says in the final episode, "I'll see you again in 25 years." So it's kind of cool that they're able to do that.
Right.
Yeah, I for the longest time didn't believe it was going to happen. And, I thought maybe the last thing we were going to see was that Between Two Worlds segment that was on the Blu-ray or something like that with the Lynch, which honestly, I wish that Lynch was sitting there talking with them, and then when he was interviewing the Palmers, it should have faded out and faded back into the Palmer living room. I think that would have been better than just a restaurant scene. But I couldn't believe when it was confirmed, because even Jennifer Lynch told me to my face, nah, it's not happening. And maybe at the time it wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Although they have said that it's been in the planning for a while. But the thing that concerns me is this, and again, I don't think this has been fully confirmed yet, so please forgive me, but Frost has said that it was a 9-episode thing. The scripts were written. Everything's great. And I was enthusiastic about that, because 9 episodes, 9 hours or so, is the equivalent of what season 1 is, the length of it, at least with the pilot.
Right.
So then rumors are coming around from, I think, Sherilyn Fenn, maybe Kimmy Robertson as well, that it's been extended to 18 episodes for Showtime.
Right.
So does that mean we're going to get 9 episodes and then maybe a second season with another 9 episodes? Or does that mean they're going to take the 9 scripts and stretch them out to 18 episodes? Are we going to dilute the story by doing that? Nobody's come out and said what is happening. But,
right.
As... I really want to see this be as tight as possible, because I don't think that... and I could be wrong, because I know there's a lot of Twin Peaks fans out there, but in order for Showtime to make any sort of profits, they need not only Twin Peaks fans, but they need some casual viewers as well.
Right.
I don't know if casual viewers will stick through 18 episodes. That's a long commitment. They didn't even stick through 22 episodes of season 2. And Lynch directed 6 episodes of the first series. And now he's going to come back and do 18 episodes, between an hour and an hour and a half each episode. I mean, what was that you were telling me about the guy who directed True Detective season 1?
Yeah, so Cary Fukuyama, apologies if I'm butchering his name, I believe he directed all 8 of the original season True Detective. And there was clearly some like creative tension between him and Nick Palazzo, but it's just a grueling schedule. I mean, because you got to think when you're filming a TV show, you're not always filming everything in order. So you might have been filming things from like episode 2 and episode 5. And my understanding is he was just wrecked. He was burned out at the end of that process, and that was 8 episodes.
Right.
And I'm kind of with you on that. I don't know if it's going to be 18 because again, we're only getting that. We've gotten that information from. I think you're right. I think it's Sherilyn Fenn and I think it's Kimmy Robertson. But all Showtime said was like in their their press release or their tweet, however it came out, they said more. And to me, it's very suspicious that they would just say more. I don't think it would be longer episodes. Like I'm pretty sure that whatever they turn out is going to be our like in our buckets. But I'm just not sure if 18 is that number either. Because I think you're right. I mean, I think this is a guy who you made the point. This is a guy who hasn't directed a movie in more than 10 years now.
Right.
How does he come out of directing retirement essentially and do 18 episodes of a show? One that's probably going to be pretty grueling to do, I would say.
And smoking the way he does. Yeah. I'm not saying Lynch can't do it. I mean, if anybody could do it, I think he could.
Right.
I'm just saying, don't be surprised if he has a Stanley Kubrick moment after it's over and he drops. Because,
Gosh.
Kubrick directed Eyes Wide Shut. A week after he finished his cut, he dropped.
Yeah.
I mean, 18 episodes, if that happens,
yeah.
That's a hell of a work commitment. I personally, and I know we all want to see Lynch direct the whole thing, and I get it. But for his health, let me just illustrate this. I wish it was Lynch, Frost, maybe Tim Hunter, maybe Leslie Linka Glatter, who's gone on to do Breaking Bad, and she did some Twin Peaks episodes. I wish maybe those 4 directors were directing it, like maybe like 4 or 5 episodes each and alternating, because for one person to do it, again, we don't even know how many episodes they're doing, but let's say they do 18, that might kill me. I can't even imagine if anything, and if Lynch does do 18 episodes, there's a very good possibility, and I don't mean like he'll drop and stuff, but I'm just saying there's a very good possibility he might just retire after that.
Yeah, that's it. That's the end.
I mean, that almost, and it very well might be, the total would be longer than all of his other output put together.
Well, the long cut of Dune probably throws that equation out a little bit.
Well,
but,
you have 90
but your
minutes.
point is well made.
90 minutes for Racerhead. Elephant Man's 2 hours. That's 3.5. Let's say Dune is 3.5. So that's 7. Blue Velvet makes 9. Wild at Heart is 11.
Yeah.
Right. The pilot Twin Peaks is hour. Let's say 2 hours. Right. So that's 13. Plus he did another 5 episodes. So that's another 3.5 hours. So that's 16.5. Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm wrong. So it'll be shorter than his total output, but
your point is well made.
It's close. It's almost like he's redoing the length of his entire career in 1 year.
Yeah. It's I don't know if I think that there were so many criticisms over these past 25 years of Twin Peaks when David Lynch wasn't around. And there's been so much made of, when the show was on and he went off to do his movie. I forget, that was Wild at Heart, right?
But let me just, I just want to stop you there.
No, go ahead.
Everybody likes to say that the second season of Twin Peaks fell apart because he was doing Wild at Heart. That is not true. Right. He directed the pilot, then went and did Wild at Heart, then came back.
Right.
Because Wild at Heart premiered May of 1990. Season 2 of Twin Peaks started in September, and they began shooting in late summer. So he wasn't doing Wild at Heart during season 2. He did it during season 1. So the question has always been, well, where the hell did he go during season 2?
Yeah.
And I think that maybe he, because of Twin Peaks, I think he was getting a lot of offers, and he probably was taking a lot of meetings and was probably gone a lot. but he wasn't doing
Yeah.
Wild at Heart, and that's a misconception that seems to have swept over the internet. And if you just do a simple timeline, that doesn't make any sense.
No, that's true. Because actually, in fact, the book that came out last summer, just before the Blu-ray set came out, in fact, maybe you remember the title of the book, but it's actually great. It's like the spoken history or
Right.
oral history of
Right.
Twin Peaks.
Right.
They kind of take that head on too, and they talk about the movie, and I think they even place it in the timeline as you have, when it happened. And what's interesting too is there seems to be like varying accounts of Lynch's availability and how often he was around, because I think it's Mark Frost, when he's interviewed, he actually makes note that Lynch was still involved in a lot of things, and one of the directors actually kind of criticizes Lynch a little bit, makes a comment about how he wanted to have like the color blue or green or something like in his episodes. But Lynch was like, no, the color palette of this show does not have those colors. You can't have like blue suitcases or something like that. I'm sure someone will correct me later on. But so there's that account. But then meanwhile, you have like Kimmy Robertson saying like, yeah, I don't know where he went. I didn't see him. And other people say that too. So to me, it's just a very interesting story, and I don't know that we'll ever get the full picture. But I'm with you. Like where was David Lynch? Was he gone at all? And if he was gone, where did he go? If he wasn't gone, why did some people seem to know where he was, while others didn't? It's fascinating, like how that show kind of lived its life.
And it's funny though. It's like we've said before on the show that a lot of people critique the whole James and Evelyn storyline, right? And that's one of the most hated subplots of Twin Peaks
Of TV.
But that subplot is a huge part of what became Lynch's Lost Highway.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think that, like, I mean, so did he come up with the James and Evelyn storyline? It's very interesting, because that there are so many ties to Lost Highway if you look at it in that way. So. But yeah, it's always been interesting. And it seems like Twin Peaks has, because second season, Kimmy Robertson's somebody who always comes out in interviews and just like, second season sucked, and it's just kind of interesting that people just throw the entire second season under the bus. Yet they have no problem going to Twin Peaks festivals and signing autographs and that type of thing. It's just but it seems like Twin Peaks. There's a lot of people who like to blame others for its misses. Everybody points fingers as to why the show went the way it did. And I got news for you, folks. That show, I know Kyle was signed with ABC for 5 years to do the show. Twin Peaks season 5 never was going to happen. I mean, if you think about it, there is so much packed in seasons 1 and 2 of Twin Peaks that I can't even imagine where that show would be at season 5. Whereas if you look at something like Lost that we've talked about before, is, it just seemed inevitable. Like, 6 seasons of Lost. Yeah, because that tells the story. But I can't even imagine 6 seasons of Twin Peaks, what that would be like. Yeah. Because there doesn't seem to be a forward trajectory of where we're going. It just seems like we're kind of just hanging out in the town, and we're over here now, and we're over here. It doesn't seem like Frost says, with season 3 we were going to come back and it was going to be hardcore and tough, and yeah, I think you can say that now, but at the time you and Lynch were off doing On the Air,
right,
which doesn't seem at all like you guys were coming back in top-notch form. It seems like you guys were still in that goofy mode.
Right. I don't. It's funny because there's been different perspectives on like what a season 3 might have been. They talk about like the duality of like good and evil in man. I think he's even talked about like that there might have been like a time jump, which I think is ironic given that time actually has jumped when this new season will air. But it's I think that Twin Peaks, there are so many issues that went along with when it was on the air originally, both with the network and with the production itself and with the actors. But the thing that I think you need to realize, too, is the audience. Like, I think people were just awestruck at first because, oh my gosh, what is this show? I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I'm watching like Magnum PI on the other station. What is this? But there came a point where I think audience patience just wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got to thinking about this, I think not last year, but the year before on Game of Thrones, when you have entire episodes of that show where it's basically just characters wandering from place to place. And when you actually look at the story of what happened in that episode, nothing really happened. Interesting characters had sort of interesting conversations with other interesting characters, or people walked from place to place, or, someone fell off a boat. I don't know. But, like, nothing really happened. But we're all sitting around like, oh, man, that was the best one yet. Tyrion really got that guy, didn't he? And when you look at, like, Season 2 of Twin Peaks, I mean, frankly, if you look at some parts of Season 1 of Twin Peaks, it's very similar in the sense that, like, in the body of an individual episode, not much happens. You really just have different characters bouncing off of characters. Maybe a little bit of story is revealed, but it's really just about, like, watching all of these different people in this interesting circumstance kind of, like, revolve around each other. And I just don't think audiences were ready for it. It's kind of why, like, when I open and I was talking about how I kind of defend Season 2, I think, watching shows like Lost and, even, like, shows like The Sopranos and stuff, like, I think it's sort of, like, trained me to be able to enjoy Twin Peaks, which, again, is ironic because Twin Peaks predates them all. But that's... there's no one factor that led to Twin Peaks' demise. But I think you're spot on. Like, my gosh, what would Season 5 of Twin Peaks look like? I mean, there's probably a whole discussion thread on that alone.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think Twin Peaks may have been more successful today because, you have streaming services. You have the Netflix thing where people can catch up. And, I think what the problem was is that when Twin Peaks aired, if you missed the episode, that was it. I mean, there was no even guarantee. There was no repeats, because we were moving forward with the plot. And they didn't even repeat Season 1 until it was all over. And they aired it again in the summertime. But again, you missed it. You missed it.
Yeah.
And Twin Peaks was one of those shows where at the time, it really did feel like if you missed one episode, you were lost. Now, if you go back and watch it, it's funny how economically simple the storytelling is. But back then it seemed very complex.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on it at all. I'm just saying there's been a lot of complex shows since then, and you go back and you go, wow, no, it's actually pretty straightforward. So when people say in the making of the cast members going, I couldn't even follow Season 2, it's like, it's pretty easy to follow if you just pay attention.
Yeah.
But today, we have Vudu, we have, Amazon, we have Netflix streaming, we have, like if it was on HBO, HBO that has all their series, all the episodes of their shows, there's Blu-rays, there's DVDs, there are so many ways to get involved with a show now. There's the internet where you can, like, you were talking about Lost, where people would, throw out theories. And I mean, imagine, like you were talking about with Lost, where Jack saw the map and then 10 minutes later you were on the internet and everyone had posted it. Well, there's a map in Twin Peaks, right, with the chalk drawing and stuff. That would have been all over the internet. Like, what does this mean? And dissecting every clue and everything, seeing the giant hand in hand with the little man and stuff like that. So I just think that while Twin Peaks came out at a perfect time because those actors were in prime form, it still was the wrong time for it to come out. Because people weren't ready for it.
Right. It's one of those things where Lost in some ways is almost like an unofficial sequel to Twin Peaks in that they did a lot of things. They addressed a lot of issues like you've just covered. Don't you remember Lost had all of those, like, Lost specials that were narrated by, like, Michael Emerson, where he would, like, bring you up to date on, like, the first 3 seasons. And if I'm not mistaken, in some of the later seasons, you actually would learn little details of plot in those little specials that you didn't even get on the show itself. An exact example escapes me, but I do remember one of those little specials, like, clarifying a plot point that many people had wondered about for a long time. Like, the show didn't make it clear, but, Carlton Cuse just in one of his, like, as he's explaining something, says it, and it's kind of like, I remember watching, like, people on Facebook, like, oh my gosh, this, that's that. And so I think you're exactly right, because there just wasn't a mechanism for that. I mean, the ABC it's almost like ABC learned lessons from Twin Peaks. I mean, I know it's a completely different staff and leadership over there between when Twin Peaks was on from when Lost was on, but if you think about every element you just covered, you can't catch up. Well, there's DVDs then, there was later streaming, there was iTunes, and then just the showrunners and the network itself try and help you catch up. They just give you a quick little, like an hour-long special. It basically brings you up on all the major things that are relevant to
They
you.
didn't even just do that, Eric. Seasons 5 and season 6, they may have started this with season 4, but I know for sure it was season 5 and season 6 of Lost. Before the new episode aired,
Yeah.
they played last week's episode with footnotes.
Yep. They did.
And
that might have been season 4.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, if you missed last week, it was a way of seeing it again, but now you got all these clues, and it was like VH1 pop-up. It was like telling you all these things, like, look out for this, that. And Twin Peaks never had that. All we got, like I said, was an Alan Thicke special where he just kind of brought us up to speed with about season 1 and had Cheryl Lee voice over a diary entry. But like I said, TV has become more savvy now than then. And I think ABC didn't know what they had. And, maybe they would have allowed it to go on a little bit more if Twin Peaks had swept the Emmy Awards.
Right.
But it didn't, so they probably were like, well, see, it's not that good, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I watched it in its original airing, after Josie died, right?
Yeah.
There was a 4-week break because ABC pulled the show.
Yes.
And then they brought it back, and it was the episode where Harry's drunk and Annie shows up. And then we got those 4 episodes, and then the show broke again, and then I think 2.5 weeks later, maybe, they aired the last 2 episodes as an ABC Sunday night movie of the week.
Right.
And that was it. But for a long time, Josie being in the doorknob, we were left thinking that was going to be the end of the show, because ABC was thinking they weren't going to air the last 6 episodes.
Gotcha.
And this is at a day and age where there was no DVD, there's no Blu-ray, there's no streaming, nothing. So, and at that time, the episodes weren't even out on VHS.
Right.
So what the hell are you going to do if you don't see the last 6 episodes,
Yeah.
But anyway, luckily we got them, but they kind of just haphazardly gave them to us. But that being said, I mentioned the character of Annie. I don't know how you feel about this, but I personally think she's a crucial role to play in this upcoming new season.
I think so too, and it's funny because I think you had mentioned something earlier about how you realized when you got online that there was a lot more controversy about something than you'd realized. I've only recently realized that Annie is a rather divisive character in Twin Peaks, and I think what's driving it is largely the Coop and Audrey shippers,
Right.
of which I can understand the perspective, but I mean, I think so much was made of that character at the end, and so much was made about just the relationship between Cooper and Annie, and there being this real connection. I mean, I think he loved her, that to the point that it's like she's the wedge that Wyndham Earle uses to draw Cooper out into the Black Lodge. I think she has to be a major character, or they better have a significant explanation
Right.
for what happened to her.
And the fact that they used her in the missing pieces.
Yeah.
I don't think Lynch would have included that if Heather Graham wasn't going to come back, because that really ties it with the nurse taking her ring and everything. But yeah, I mean, Annie's so powerful she can get Cooper to stop talking about trees.
Yes.
So, but yeah, no, I think that, it's funny to me how people, for the longest time, until I interviewed Jennifer Lynch, I didn't even go online and look up Twin Peaks on anything, because to me, Twin Peaks is a very personal thing. So I just was like, I don't even want to hear naysayers and that. But yeah, a lot of people, like you said, they don't like Annie because they want Cooper and Audrey together. Well, guess what, people? Cooper told Audrey in season 1 they needed to be friends because she was a young high school girl. I know Cooper or Kyle MacLachlan has made the point, like, well, Annie's a young girl too. No, she's actually an ex-nun who tried to kill herself, so she's a little older than Audrey. But I thought it was cool having Audrey go off with John Justice Wheeler and Cooper with Annie, because Yeah, I understand people want them together, but at the same time, though, some people who are good for each other don't really go that way, and they go in separate directions.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. There's a lot of people who are high school sweethearts and they're so perfect together, but then a year later they're off dating other people. It's just
Right.
the way it is. But yeah, I mean, I know Billy Zane gets a lot of flack. Even Sherilyn Fenn gives that character a lot of flack, and I never, I get it in a sense that people want to see them together, but you're still seeing scenes with those characters, so it's not, yeah, so what, they're not interacting with each other, but the whole tempo of season 2, like the beginning of season 1, it's like Cooper and Audrey are totally flirting with each other over breakfast and numerous episodes. But
Right.
by the time the Major tells Bobby Briggs' dream in the premiere of second season, about where he sees Bobby, and the music by Badalamenti comes in, the show shifts from being this like cute, flirty show into almost like spiritualism,
Yeah.
and Cooper and Audrey were always this like flirtatious thing, like, but even like when he rescues her from One-Eyed Jacks, it's almost like there's the connection, but when she says, "Oh, I prayed that you would come and you did," he's not like passionately looking at her. He's holding her like a dad would, while her real
Right.
dad is looking down on them, literally looking down on them.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. I mean, if the new season happens where Cooper and Audrey get together, okay, I can live with it because they're now older.
Yeah.
But at the time, come on, Audrey's like chaining herself up to banks and stuff like that. I mean, that's no one that should be dating an FBI agent.
It's I don't part of the problem is I think that Cooper's character, it there's always the behind the scenes drama they talk about with Lara Flynn Boyle and Kyle MacLachlan, and that's the real reason they didn't get together. But I almost wonder if there could have been like a moonlighting thing where they'd get them together and it would have been terrible. I mean, so much of why that relationship worked when they were being all flirty was just that I think there was like more passion, more heat from the fact that they were kind of dancing around each other. And then as Cooper got to know her, it kind of evolved into that sort of, like you say, that like father or older brother relationship. That's not to say in the new series, you're right, maybe it can't develop into something else even further, but it felt like, to me on the show, it felt organic the way that it did develop. I mean, it makes sense that the 18-year-old girl doesn't see it and she still pursues him to the point where he needs to tell her, like, listen, we can't do that. But to me, that felt honest to his character. Like, I never felt like that plot just like skidded off the rails and you could just see the hand of the writers. It felt like it made sense in the world they had created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it just, I mean, like, even when Audrey finds out about Dennis Denise or whatever, and she's like, there's women FBI agents. I mean, you almost get the sense that Audrey's thinking about maybe in the future, heading in that direction.
Right.
But not heading in that direction to hang out and be with Cooper anymore, but almost seems like that would be her ticket out of town.
Yes.
But
like he's inspired her.
Right. To and in a way, when she starts working for her dad in this, especially towards the second half of season 2, you really see that she's becoming this very like powerful businesswoman, and that's why I've kind of maintained that I hope that with season 3 or whatever they end up calling this thing, that I hope that she's in charge of the Great Northern Hotel.
Right.
And that she's taking care of her dad and Johnny, her brother, and maybe just having her be angry that maybe John Justice Wheeler never came back for her, and she's now this, the lady in the castle that, and then when Cooper, and dealing with maybe the whole Bob thing or whatever, and of course there's rumors going around that Ray Wise is now going to be the personification of Bob, which I think is great.
Yes, that's the only answer to me.
Yeah, exactly, and it makes logical sense. But I think that's where you can get her out of her shell. Maybe she can inspire Cooper to come out and but I don't know. I think I mean what's interesting is at the end of the show, we are left to believe that Cooper is possessed by Bob. But then the movie comes out and says no, the bad one got out. Because at the end of the show, it looks like the bad one just kind of like grabs the good one and kind of jumps into him.
Right.
Before they exit the curtains. But then the movie makes it very clear, like, no, they've been split.
Right.
Right? So, like, with Leland was Bob, but Leland was also Leland. But the Cooper that's out is only the negative side of Cooper as Bob. There's no humanity in him because the good one has been split out.
I mean, yes. Everything we have seen suggests that is the case. My only point of hesitation on that would be that we never really saw the mechanics of Bob's possession of Leland. It could very much be the case that there was a similar connection. Because remember, in Firewalk with Me, we see Leland return to the Black Lodge, and Bob and Leland are kind of both in there, and there's that weird kind of trippy scene where he like absorbs the blood out of him. So, just everything we've seen, I think you're right. I think that the Cooper possession split, however you want to describe it, is probably like fundamentally different. I just don't think we know enough about what happened to Leland to say with any certainty that it didn't work in a similar fashion. That like the innocent young boy Leland was when Bob came into him wasn't all along trapped in some in the Black Lodge or in some kind of limbo.
And maybe that's why in the final episode Ray Wise says, "I did not kill anybody."
Right.
In the Black Lodge. Maybe that's a very excellent point. But yeah, I'm excited. Obviously, we all are excited. There's rumors going around now that it might not be 2016. They might bump it to 2017. That has not been confirmed. But that is the rumor going around. I hope it's just like it will finish in 2017. Because 2016. Although, 2016 is the 25 years from the series, but if they do 2017, then it's 25 years from the movie. So,
right.
So either way it works, but I don't want to wait another 2 years for this. But
I definitely don't.
I understand people want it to be done right, but again, it's like Zack Snyder and Batman vs Superman. It's like we're gonna push it back 2 more years. It's like, come on, just give us something, give us a trailer, give us a hint of where you're taking the story. Because with all these Showtime negotiation things that's been happening, Mark Frost has been very, very silent on everything, which is probably smart. But at the same time, though, it's very interesting that he hasn't come out and really said anything, But rumor has it they're going to start shooting in September, which is interesting because there's a Twin Peaks festival in England in September.
Oh.
So are they going to reveal stuff? Why aren't those people shooting? Why are they there at the festival if they're not shooting? So we'll see. I'm sure there'll be more news and everything moving forward. But Eric, I would love to have you on again if you're interested in all this Twin Peaks stuff. I think it would be great to have your insights even more on future episodes.
Absolutely. Gosh, talk about Twin Peaks more. I was excited when I heard. I'm excited now to talk to you. And the closer we get to this thing, I feel like my head's going to explode some days just knowing we're finally going to get it. Again, maybe not even a resolution. I don't know. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but we're going to get more story. We're going to spend more time in Twin Peaks. That's only a good thing.
Right. As long as Lynch doesn't shoot it on a PD 150, I think we'll be good. I don't want this to look like Inland Empire. But that being said, it's funny. I started these podcasts more or less just to kind of, because I was so jazzed after I interviewed Jennifer Lynch, right, that it kind of brought it all back to me. And so I was like, hey, I said to some people, let's talk about Twin Peaks, and that'd be kind of fun. And so we just did these couple podcasts and thinking, okay, that was good. But then the Blu-ray set was announced. So I was like, oh, cool. We'll have more stuff to talk about then. Oh, there's going to be missing pieces with it. Even better, And then we thought, okay, that's it. And then, of course, they announced the new season. So now there's all kinds of things to talk about, to get ourselves prepared for it. And then when the new season comes out, we're going to do after shows and we're going to do other stuff about it. And it's interesting because, you know, if I had done these podcasts 5, 6 years ago, they would have stopped a long time ago. But we seem to start these right at the right time when Lynch and Frost awoke from their coma and decided to continue the story. But I'll tell you an interesting anecdote, and I don't think I've ever said this on a podcast. Back in 2005, I had just finished a film that I had directed, and I was thinking about one of the things I was thinking about doing was doing a short film where it would be sort of like, I'm not going to say Silence of the Lambs, but it would be not surreal, but it would be more set in sort of like that FBI kind of thriller environment. And it would be a short film detailing Cooper and Wyndham Earl before anything happened. So it would be like the whole Caroline story.
Oh, okay.
And then showing them like every day, like, you know, playing chess and using that as my template to go back and forth, where any move that Earl and Cooper did in real life, it would reflect on the chessboard.
Right.
And because Cooper always lost, remember.
Yeah.
So, and then there was the implication even in the show that Bob was there in Pittsburgh when Cooper got shot. Remember when Leland's in the jail and he says, like, that time in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't call him Cooper, he calls him Pooper, which is always funny to me. But anyway, I reached out to Mark Frost's office about, well, who do I have to get the rights to just use character names? Because, I mean, movies have used character names before as, like, homages and stuff. And I just wanted to, and this wasn't even going to be done really for profit. I was just wanting to just do something, but it may have been shown somewhere, so I wanted to make sure all was good. And his assistant told me back in 2005 that they were actually working on Twin Peaks Season 3 as a graphic novel.
I've heard that before.
And then that ended up getting nixed by Lynch too. So, I mean, going back as far as 2005, Frost and company were really trying to figure out how to continue the story of Twin Peaks. So while they may have not have had the Showtime deal then, it's clear that this has been on Frost's mind for a long time.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's involved again, and he wasn't involved with Fire Walk with Me, and as much as I like that movie, I think his involvement, I think that him and Lynch work so well together. And because I think they balance each other out, you know, I think that Lynch makes Frost a little more surreal, and I think Frost gives Lynch a solid script to bounce off ideas from. I think that when Lynch writes maybe entirely on his own, you know, I think in the case of Blue Velvet, I think it completely works. And Wild at Heart, I know people question that movie, but I love it. But in the case of Fire Walk with Me, I just thought that Lynch and Ingalls didn't hit the level of intelligence that necessarily that Frost brought to Lynch's work. There seems to be a lot of literary references, and I don't mean just like spoken, but just in terms of themes. Right. When Frost and Lynch work together, it feels like a great novel, you know. Yeah. And then when Lynch and Ingalls work together, it felt like a 2-hour and 15-minute like mood piece. You know, it was a character mood piece. So it was a different tone. And I think that was another thing that threw people with Firewall, because it was just completely different than the show. You know, it wasn't funny. There wasn't a lot of any humor in it, really. So
right. I mean, you know, one wonders if Frost it was the one largely bringing the humor, or if Frost was just simply the one saying like, "Hey, David, this is some dark material. I mean, when we really dig into what we're doing, this is dark. We've got to have. I mean, let's have Andy hit himself with a floorboard or something like this. Like we're talking about a young girl who was raped and murdered. And the movie, of course, like it dives right into that particular subject material, and it's just I think it had the reaction it initially did, and even still does sometimes today, because it is so dark. Like you almost don't want to like really look that movie in the eye. But yeah, it's a valid point to make that it's like that's where Lynch is untethered from Mark Frost. He's working with Ingalls, and it's funny. Like I guess I'd never really thought about that difference before, but maybe separating those two guys in that case made all the difference. Maybe Frost was the one who could have brought some balance to that movie. Maybe we might have gotten a different product.
Well, it's sort of like when Lawrence Kasdan came in with George Lucas and did The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, he took George's ideas and applied them where it logically made sense.
Right.
Yeah, or even Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, Spielberg and Lucas talked to Lawrence Kasdan for like a few weeks, and then Lawrence Kasdan said, okay, and then he actually took their ideas and made it make logical sense.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have Lucas and Spielberg writing the script, we get Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So,
yeah, what I think is particularly interesting is that you've actually named, I think, what is probably the best analogy you can. You've got George Lucas, a guy who I think has great sort of macro level ideas. Just to come up with the idea of Star Wars. I mean, you read his initial treatments where he talks about Star Killer, and I think even Mace Windu is originally named in some of those initial pieces. And it's really dense, like really geeky, kind of like in-depth stuff. But I think you need someone like a Spielberg or, again, like Lawrence Kasdan to kind of really, it's like, George, this is all great and all, like spaceships and lasers and stuff, but you need to find the humanity in it. And that's why people respond to Empire Strikes Back the way that they do. Like, you're so drawn to Han Solo. Frankly, you're drawn to Luke Skywalker. I mean, I think you felt the Luke Skywalker character's humanity in that first movie. I think I'd be wrong to say otherwise, but he definitely gets several layers deeper in that movie versus, and again, this is a Twin Peaks podcast, so now I'm talking about Star Wars. But to bring it back to Twin Peaks, I think that Mark Frost helped sort of take these fantastic ideas that David Lynch was able to come up with. He kind of, it's like, okay, a girl is murdered in this town, but there's drug runners, and there's prostitutes, and there might be a supernatural element. And, Mark Frost is maybe the one saying, it's like, okay, but what if we have like a really heartfelt FBI agent at the center of this piece? I don't know if that's how it happened. I mean, maybe Cooper was always a part of Lynch's original idea, but I think you've really hit on something with that particular comparison. You've got the big idea guy, and then you have that other person who can kind of translate and bring out the humanity of it.
Also, I think it helped that Frost was a television writer.
Yeah.
And so he knew how to take David Lynch's ideas and visuals and bring it down to, a TV level, even though the show doesn't feel like a TV show. If you go to the actual locations of where everything was shot, I mean, it's amazing how economic the whole thing was, because the sheriff's station and the sawmill are directly across the street from each other. But you would never know that watching the show, right? But you can just see. When they're like, oh, how easy. Turn the camera, shoot that direction. Yeah. So, I think I think that they brought out the best of each other at that time, and I was sad that they kind of split apart. But obviously Lynch went on to do other stuff. But I'm anxious to see what their collaboration feels like now. So that's kind of like where I'm at. But it's okay to talk about Star Wars on a David Lynch podcast because he was going to direct Return of the Jedi, damn it. So
my gosh, what would that movie have been?
It would have been exactly like Return of the Jedi now. Because
Lucas would have come in and fixed it.
And then imagine when Lucas would have taken Lynch's movie and created the special edition out of it. Lynch would have been like, take my name off it. My name is Judas Booth and Alan Smithy. That's a Dune reference for you, people.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully Eric will come back and join us because he has amazing insights. But anyway, let us know what you think about today's episode. Subscribe to the channel, and be sure to give this video a like. Eric, is there any way people can reach you on the internet if people are curious? Do you have a Twitter account or anything?
I do. My Twitter account is @NeoMyers, and I have I've actually written a couple of novels called Titan, and Titan: The Dark Path. But I'll post some materials on the YouTube and on the Facebook page for people if they're interested.
Where can people buy these books? Are they on Amazon or anything? Or?
They're available through Amazon, and I got there's also Kindle versions as well as hard copy versions. That's largely where I publish through.
What kind of novels are they?
So I wanted to write a superhero novel. You know, we have superhero movies, we have comic books, we have cartoons, but I didn't really see a whole lot in the novel space like about superheroes. I mean, you have Harry Potter, and I guess you can count him as a superhero. And even Hunger Games, maybe Katniss is a kind of a superhero, but I run it already like a pure superhero. Like this is a guy. Titan is a character who he's got like the simplified way of explaining it is he has liquid metal in his bones, and there's a lot more to it. There's kind of some religious allegories, and that's kind of built into the mythology. And it's an action adventure, kind of young adult. There's a love story. I think people would enjoy him.
Now, you gave us your Twitter handle, but there's a lot of people that watch this that are in other countries. So can you spell it out for people?
Absolutely. So at Neo Myers, N as in Ned, E as in Edward, O as in Obama, M as in Myers, Y as in Young, E as in Eric, R as in Rex, and S as in Sam. I think I spelled that right. Neo Myers.
What's your picture so people can know it's you? Is it just you?
I actually think it's just my face. I'm not clever enough to stick any other logo on there. Because it's I talk about the book, but also I talk about last Halloween. I think I did like a live tweet of watching Halloween 5, which is kind of like one of my favorite hate watch films.
I like Halloween 5.
Oh man, let's do a podcast about that. We can hash it out.
Yeah, definitely. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for watching. We will see you next time. Take care.